Well, good morning. Happy New Year again to everyone. And I'm sure many of you heard the story I'm about to relate to you, but it's been going around for a while now. It's a story of this boy and his dad. And this young boy was pestering his dad. I'm sure no parent has ever experienced that before. But this young boy was pestering his father. His father had stuff that he had to get done, had stuff to do. And the boy kept coming and just, kind of pestering him. And so the father decided he was going to give the young man an assignment, and that would keep him busy. And so he took out a picture of the world out of a magazine, and he tore it up, and he gave it to his son, and he said, "Put this back together again. And then after you're done, bring it back to me." So the father thought he would at least get 10 or 15 minutes of peace and quiet. 30 seconds later, the son returns with the world put back together again. And the father at this point is impressed. How in the world did you manage to put the picture of the earth back together again so quickly? And the son said, "Well, Dad, it's easy. There was a picture of a man on the other side. And I just put the picture of the man together, and then the world came together." Now that'll preach, that story alone. And there's a lot of different directions that we can go with that. But it is true that the more together the people of the world are, the more together the world will be. This is true with families. It's true with neighborhoods and communities. It's true with churches. It's true, in any group of people that you could possibly think of. The people themselves need to be together, and then the world will be together. And just as a side note, there's some of our volunteers have to endure my message twice on one Sunday, and so they hear the same jokes and everything, but this is information just for you. This next part, I didn't say in the last one, but one of the troubles that I see when it comes to politics, and I agree politicians can cause a lot of problems, I agree, but one of the problems that I have with the American people today is we always blame politicians for our problems. You know what? If you want to know the problems of America, we need to look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. The government is simply a manifestation of the country itself. And so we got to put people together, and everyone, I think, strives to have what might be called a together life. Now, if anyone here is aspiring to be dysfunctional, this may not be the right message for you. I can recommend some churches for you, and I'm just kidding on that. I didn't say that. So just kidding. But no one here, I think, is aspiring to be dysfunctional. Everyone here wants to be functional, and as a result of that, everyone here makes certain plans. And we plan to have a successful life, and we make plans for every day. We plan out our days, we plan out our months, we plan out our weeks, we plan out our lives. Even those of us that don't plan, we make plans and don't think we're making plans, but we plan the next party, we plan weddings, we plan funerals, we plan all kinds of things. We make plans, and we have certain expectations that come along with that, and it's natural to do that. But what happens when our plans are changed? What happens when we're heading in one direction and then we end up going off in a totally different direction? What happens when life or God has plans different from our own? What do we do then? Today I want to talk to you about change of plans. I want to talk to you about what do we do. First of all, how do we know when God is moving us in a different direction? And how do we handle that? How do we handle that change in life? Now, change is a tough subject in general because some people have a hard time with change, period. Not just a change of plans, but a change in circumstances, a change in relationships, a change in life. Some people have a hard time with change, period. When I think of those that have a hard time with change, I think of my dog, Rex. Now, Rex is great for sermon illustrations, let me tell you, but Rex likes to get comfortable. And when he gets comfortable, he doesn't want to move. And so he will get really comfortable on Jane's lap. I mean, really snug as a bug in a rug, as you might say, just comfortable. And then at some point, though, Jane has to get out of that chair, has to move. And as soon as she starts to move, he will start to growl. And he growls in a way that he sounds like a really vicious dog. Now, if you've ever met my dog, Rex, he is not vicious. And if an intruder broke into our house, he just want to play with them. He's not a threat to anybody, but he knows how to growl. And he knows how to register his disapproval and communicate that disapproval to everyone around. Because Rex does not want to move. And people can be like that too. We get very comfortable with life a certain way. And then when something happens that we have to change, or when change comes and it's not invited change, it's not change that we asked for, change that we want, sometimes We have a tough time with that. Now, this is true with people in jobs and people in individuals and so on and so forth. We tend to rebel against and resist change, but change is inevitable. Benjamin Franklin once said that there are two constants in life, death and taxes. He could have added a third, and that is change. Change is one of the greatest constants in life. The one thing that you can count on is in life there will be change. There will be. People die. Relationships change. People move. Jobs fall apart. Businesses collapse. Businesses get bought out. Change happens. You can't stop it from happening. And if you decide you're going to drive your life into the ground, so to speak, and say, I refuse to change, then you are just asking to be unhappy. You're asking for problems. We just celebrated our son's 17th birthday. We had about a dozen teenage boys in our house overnight, one night, and we did survive. So thank you for your prayers on that. But Jonathan has changed a lot. He's changed a lot since we were called to this church 10 years ago. When we came to this church 10 years ago, Jonathan had not yet even turned 7 years old. He was 6 years old. And I have a picture on our refrigerator of Jonathan at our church had a homecoming, outdoor homecoming under a tent that year. And I have a picture of Jonathan and Jennifer, both little kids. And now, look at them now. Jennifer's an adult, 21 years old. I mean, where in the world did time go? Jonathan now 17 years old. I mean, I'm getting old too, It's like I didn't have any gray hair when I came here to the OBC, but now, So life is full of change. And even though there's a part of me sometimes I look at my kids and I'm like, man, what happened to those days of the cuteness and, all that? But what's the alternative? I'm grateful that God has given my kids the life that he's given them. And I'm grateful for the blessings that I have. Change is inevitable. You cannot resist it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all change is good. And how do we know when we should change our plans? And how do we know when we shouldn't? Now, I do believe, back to my dog for a second, I do believe that Rex is a Baptist dog. And because he doesn't like change, you've heard this old joke before. By the way, recently someone complained that I criticize other denominations. I criticized Baptists more than any other denomination ever. So, but Rex doesn't like to change, and just as Baptists don't. The old joke, how many Baptists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is change. So I had a rude awakening on this when I first came here as pastor of OBC 10 years ago. And I was sitting in a trustee meeting, and the trustees came to me with a suggestion. And they said, we need to get rid of our organ. There used to be an organ sitting here back in the old days. This whole platform used to be different too, by the way, but there used to be an organ right here. Those of you that were here 10 years ago, remember that organ. Now, the trustee said to me, and he said, okay, we need to get rid of the organ because the organ does not work. It's broke, and it's been broken for a long time now. And, in fact, the speakers for the organ were being used as a table in the back part of the church. So the organ was broke, it was taking up space, and no one was willing to play the organ. So we had no organist, and we had no working organ. And the trustees priced the organ, and it was going to cost more money than the organ was worth to fix the organ. So the trustees logically said we should probably just get rid of the organ. I thought that made logical sense. I thought that made sense. I thought no one would object to that. I was wrong. So when it came time for that organ and the organ disappeared, there was like a revolt, almost like a mutiny going on because people were really upset about that. And it was a learning experience for me because you ask yourself, why is it that people would resist change like that? And here's why. It's because there's a lot of symbology in that. And the fact that we now have drums where the organ used to be is an indication of what a lot of the people were fearing when the organ went away. Change is very tough. When people become emotionally, by the way, I want to make clear, I do like the drums, and I like the people that play the drums, so praise the Lord, I'll be clear on that. But people are emotionally invested in certain things. Whether we're talking about the church, and I would say it's especially true in the church, because people, they see all the change taking place out here, and they want to keep things the same here in church, because it's security, They want to keep things the same in their home. They want to control that and security. But A lot of people have a hard time with change. This is especially true with type A people. Now, I would ask for a show of hands, how many of you are type A, but I know who you are. Being the pastor here, I know the type A people here in this church. So no need for a show of hands. Now, type A people especially have a hard time with this because they like to be in control. Type A people like to control circumstances and sometimes other people, and to make sure that life is a certain way. And if life is arranged a certain way, they're happy. All is well. But what happens when people move to different places they're not supposed to move, when circumstances get adjusted, when the game board gets changed? What happens then? Happiness isn't quite there. Instead, there's anxiety, stress, frustration, and worry. And I want to ask you as we go into this message today, what is it that you are trusting in, and where do you get your security emotionally, and where do you get your happiness? Is it based on circumstances? Is it based on things? Is it based on you being able to maintain control of your life? If it's based on those things, I would submit to you that you are fighting a losing battle, that you are destined not for happiness and joy and peace, but for the very opposite of those things. So how do we deal with change? And how do we know when God is leading us to change? We're going to look at two books today for this. We're going to look at the book of Jude, obviously, because that's our series. And then we're going to look over at a few verses from the book of Proverbs, which provides some very practical wisdom on how to deal with things like change. So in the book of Jude, we know Jude wrote this letter sometime in the 1st century A.D., and he wrote it shortly after his brother James had been martyred for the faith. Jude writes, Jude, a bondservant of Jesus Christ and brother of James, to those who are called, sanctified by God the Father, and preserved in Jesus Christ. Mercy, peace, and love be multiplied to you. All of us need and want, certainly those of us aware of our sinful condition, all of us need and want mercy. And all of us here want peace, and we all want love. But note, Jude ties those things not into stuff and circumstances or even other people. But mercy, peace, and love are multiplied to us through Jesus Christ. It is through God and God alone that we can get mercy, peace, and love. If you are trusting in anything else in your life to bring you mercy, peace, and love, you are trusting in the wrong source. Perspective is also very important. Perspective really is crucial when it comes to how to deal with change. Because if you're not grounded personally, and then life happens and all this change happens and you're not grounded, you're going to be just like the Apostle Paul says, someone that's tossed to and fro and thrown all around. So perspective is vital. And look at James's perspective. We covered this last week, and you can relax. I'm not going to preach all of last week's sermon. Just real quick, the main thrust of last week's sermon. James saw himself as a bondservant of Jesus Christ. And if you've studied who James is, or who Jude rather is, Jude was the brother of Jesus. And yet Jude does not identify himself as the brother of Jesus. Jude identifies himself as a servant of Jesus. And if we identify ourselves humbly and gracefully as the servants of Jesus Christ, understanding that our whole purpose in life is to serve him and glorify him, if we understand that, life will be clear and will make more sense to us. And we'll be able to deal with the changes, because then we know whether we're up or whether we're down, whether we're rich, whether we're poor, whether we're sick, whether we're in health, whatever our state may be, on the valley, in a mountaintop, whatever, our role, our job is to bring glory and honor to Jesus Christ. Very simple. That's our call. That's our purpose. And so we take our orders from him. But if you put yourself on the throne and make your, what you want in life to be most important, then you're not really serving God. You're serving yourself, and you're not really going to be happy in that way. And then we look and we see this whole thing about change right here in this next verse. It's not really a phrase or a verse that's highlighted a lot, but it's really powerful. And when this leaped out of me, I was like, oh, this is too good to just breeze over. So we're going to dedicate this whole service to it, and that is this. Notice in verse 3, Jude says, "Beloved, while I was very diligent to write to you concerning our common salvation, I found it necessary to write to you, exhorting you to contend earnestly for the faith, which was once for all delivered to the saints." Next Sunday, we're going to look at what it means to contend for the faith. But this week, I want us to see something. Jude is referring to two letters here. Two letters are in view. There's the letter Jude wanted to write, and there's the letter Jude did write. 2 letters. There's the letter Jude was very diligently desiring to write, and there was the letter he felt compelled to write. The NIV highlights this. The NIV translation of this talks about, I felt compelled to write and urge you, rather than write this first letter I was planning, I instead felt compelled to urge you to contend for the faith. Now, the Greek phrase that we get the word compelled from really means to compress. It was Jude was saying, I feel a pressure, a constraint. I have to write this letter to you. I wanted to write about our common salvation, but instead I feel constrained. I feel pressured. I feel a necessity. I must write you instead about the need to contend for the faith. So Jude had plans. He had plans, but he ended up having to go this direction, a change in direction. Now, I'm going to give my premise, and I think this is borne out by some pretty strong evidence. My premise is that this necessity, this compulsion came from the Holy Spirit, that Jude was compelled by God to write about the need to contend for the faith. You say, what's your evidence of that? My evidence for that primarily is the fact that Jude is in the Bible, and this other letter is not. We do not have this other letter. We don't know if Jude wrote it or not. The letter that Jude wanted to write, we don't have it. We don't have it. Instead, what we have is this letter that he felt the need to write. That's the letter we have. That's the letter that made it into the New Testament canon. That's the letter that rose above all the other letters that Jude wrote. And by the way, people wrote a lot of letters back then. We know for a fact that Paul wrote more than 2 letters to Corinth. We just don't have the other letters. We only have the 2. We only have the 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, but we know Paul wrote at least 4 times to the church of Corinth. There's a lot of letters that were written back then. The post office was not as efficient as it is today in the Roman times, but the Romans had a good thing going, Roman roads and everything, and so they had a postal service going, and there was a lot of letters being written. But this letter is the only one that Jude wrote that made it into the New Testament. So because Jude answered the call, because he was flexible, because he went with God's plan instead of his own plan, we are now blessed with his letter and have been blessed for 2,000 years. You can decide that you want to serve your plan and do it your way, but if you do it God's way, the blessings of heaven open up, and more people will be impacted by that than you can possibly imagine. Doing it God's way is always the best way. It's always the best way. But, so a lot of people will then respond, and they'll go to the other extreme, and they'll say, well, I guess it's just wrong to plan then. In fact, I've seen a lot of memes on Facebook from Christians saying, well, I'm not going to make any plans for the new year. I'm just going to let God tell me what to do. And I believe this is a, with all due respect, I believe this is a naive extreme. Now, let me tell you about a movie that's not exactly theologically correct, and I'm not citing this movie as any kind of a Bible study exercise here or anything, but the movie is called The Princess Bride, okay? All right? And it's a comedy, all right? It's a fun movie to watch, okay? And one of the movies, one of the characters in the movie, one of the characters at one point, his name is Inigo Montoya. Okay, so, and we're not going to go through You Killed My Father. Anyway, so that's not the scene. But Inigo Montoya is looking for Wesley. Wesley's the main character, and Wesley's been missing, and he's been tortured, and he's been killed. They don't know that yet, but he's not dead. He's only mostly dead. So you got to see the movie to understand that. Anyway, inside joke for those that saw it. So Inigo Montoya is looking for Wesley. And at one point, this is a silly scene, but again, it's a comedy. He pulls out his sword, and he starts praying to his father. And he says, Father, guide my sword. And so he's literally walking around like this. It just kind of, his eyes are closed. He's just walking around, and he finally runs into a tree. And it turns out that tree has a secret passageway and everything. So obviously, this is not theological instruction for you. It's not good to pray to dead people. That's not good. We're not supposed to do that. Regardless of what other denominations might say, we are to pray to God and God only. And not only that, but that is not really how you even follow God. You don't just kind of wander aimlessly and stagger around like you're under the influence of artificial substances of some kind and then hope that you stumble into God's will. That is not how God tells us to do. The Bible is clear that we should plan. Planning is a good thing, but there's a way to plan. And that's what we're going to look at. And so in Proverbs, we see some great wisdom here. First, in Proverbs 21 and verse 5, we're told the plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty surely to poverty. Now, this can be literal or it can be metaphoric. So, in other words, we can be talking literally about money and finances here, but it's also just talking in general about life. If you want to be profitable in your life goals, profitable in life, successful in life, then you need to plan. You need to be diligent in your planning. If you're haphazard in your planning and don't plan ahead, and you just recklessly rush from one thing to the next, and you're always in a hurry and never walking, never looking before you walk, rather, then you're going to end up in poverty. That's the warning here. And that poverty could be literal or metaphoric. So planning is important. Also, without counsel, plans go awry. But in the multitude of counselors, they are established. Now, this requires something very important that a lot of people don't like to do. In order to get wise counsel, we have to do something called listening. Now, listening does not come naturally for some people. Some people would rather talk than listen. I like this saying here. It is impossible for a worthwhile thought to enter your mind through an open mouth. You have to be willing to listen in order to get wise counsel. You also have to be willing to discern between what wise counsel is and just what a mere opinion is. It's easy to get access to opinions. I mean, just go on social media. All the world's problems have been solved on Facebook and Twitter. And all of social media will tell you exactly how the country should be run, how the world should operate. I mean, there's plenty of opinions out there. Never a shortage of opinions. But how many opinions are grounded in wisdom? And here, the writer of Proverbs is saying that we need to surround ourselves with wise counsel. Wise counsel. So if you, for example, feel led to start a business, and let's say you want to start a business in accounting, then you should talk. Excuse me, pardon me, still getting over my cough here. You should talk to people who have an accounting background. If you're going to start a business in accounting, you don't want to come talk to me. I mean, I'd be like, yeah, those are numbers, and they add up to something. I'm not an accountant. I'm the farthest thing from an accountant. Everyone that's ever served as church treasurer here will tell you that and attest to that. So you don't want to come to me. You want to ask someone that's got some wisdom and experience in that field. So you seek out wise counsel based on how you feel God is leading you. If you don't seek out counsel, plans will go awry. You should also seek out wise counsel just in general life principles. Do you know how many people seek out more counsel and more guidance on their planning their wedding than they do on planning their marriage? How many times, if your marriage is important to you, let me ask you a simple question. How many books have you read about marriage? For most Americans, the answer is 0. Most Americans have never attended a single seminar on marriage, have never read a book on marriage, have very rarely consulted people that have been married for many years to get wisdom from them. Instead, I mean, I've joked about this before, but instead they'll go on social media and they'll read articles like 5 Secrets of Relationships from Katy Perry, And that was a large trending article for me for many months. And I'm like, if I want relationship advice, I'm not going to go to Katy Perry. All right? If I want relationship advice on my marriage, for example, I'm going to go to like Jack and Ramona Fye, who have been married for like a long time, okay? All right? How many years now? 64 years, okay? All right? So if I want marriage advice, I'm going to go to a couple that's been married for 64 years and still look relatively happy, So, all right? That's what I'm going to go. They are happy married, but that's what I'm going to go for, right? I'm not going to go for someone that's not even married. So, but we as human beings in society today, we go for advice in all the wrong places. Now, the most important advice, though, we should get and guidance is from God. And that's why I like this proverb. In Proverbs 19 and verse 21, it says, there are many plans in a man's heart. Nevertheless, the Lord's counsel, that will stand. So here's a clue for you, or a piece of information that you may not know. You don't have all the answers. You don't know everything. You are limited in your ability to understand stuff. Even if you have the brain of Albert Einstein, even if you're as smart as Einstein, even Einstein couldn't figure everything out. In fact, at one point, his teacher assistant came to him and said, Mr. Einstein, how come you give the same test every year to your physics students? Every year, the same questions on your test. Aren't you afraid someone's going to cheat? Why do you give the same exact test every year? And his response, the answers have changed. And that's because even in the field of science, which a lot of people look to as being the end-all, be-all, science is constantly changing with new discoveries and new insights, new information. You see, the fact of the matter is, you don't know what's around the corner. You don't know what you're going to discover tomorrow. You don't know what's over the horizon. You don't know. God does. And if you trust in yourself to have all the answers, you're trusting in the wrong spot. As smart as you are and as smart as the people around you are, you don't have all the answers. I have people that tell me exactly, politically, their opinions, and they tell me exactly what's going to happen to America if so-and-so is reelected or if so-and-so gets elected or whatever. And I'm like, really? Where's your crystal ball? Are you God? You have no idea what's going to happen to our country tomorrow. Something completely unforeseen may happen to America literally in the next hour. Something could be happening right now that we don't know about. Fact of the matter is, only God knows the future. And we as Americans need to be spending more time in prayer than we spend more time pontificating and complaining, number one. But number two, we need to be trusting in the Lord. And this gets to, frankly, this powerful piece of wisdom here. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Proverbs 1 and verse 7 tells us. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 9 and verse 10 tells us. And the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. This is powerful when you think about it. What this is basically saying is, the better you know God, the more understanding you will have about life. The closer you are to God, the more life will make sense. That's what it's saying. And this is so fundamental at a very basic level. I'm not going to belabor this point a lot, but you've heard me speak on apologetics a lot and everything. But let me give you a practical side of this. If you don't believe in God, and I mean this very lovingly, and I'm speaking to the people in the video, most of you here believe in God, obviously, but if you don't believe in God, your entire thought process is affected by that. Because if you don't believe in God, then you believe that all that there is just this natural world. And the only thing that there is reality that we can see, touch, taste, feel, and hear, and that's it. There's nothing, that's just materialism. It's called materialism in the scientific way. That's all that there is. So those people that don't believe in God say. And if that's how you see life, your whole perspective is two-dimensional. It's like watching a 3D movie without the 3D glasses. And everything's going to be distorted. You understand that the Bible teaches over and over again that what we don't see affects what we do see. Paul talks about how we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this present world, against spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. That's our battle. We're battling them. We're battling the devil and his forces of demons. That's who we're fighting. But if you don't believe in God or the supernatural, then you're going to be completely oblivious to all of that. And your entire perspective is just going to be on what you see. You want to know why there's so much hate right now, I believe, in society? One of the reasons why there's so much hate in society right now is because people aren't cognizant of that spiritual warfare that's going on. And so they see a person coming against them, and they hate that person. And the Bible tells us that we should love that person and pray for that person and be aware that there are spiritual forces at work. The devil and the enemy will manipulate people. He will manipulate people to come against you. It happens all the time. Are you going to hate the people that the devil's manipulating? Most people do. Most people do. And we have to be aware of this. And the more that we're aware of our limitations and God's greatness, and the more we're aware of the spiritual realm and what's going on, the wiser we will be. The more we will be driven to our knees to pray. The more we will understand, hey, there's stuff going on and I don't know. And here's something else. The closer you are to God, and this is hard to explain, you just have to trust me on this, and I'm not saying I'm the spiritual giant on this, but I've learned a few things over the years. And I know there's people in this church that are tuned in on this even more than I am, okay? But the closer you are to God, the more you sense the spiritual. The more you just sense it, and you can tell it's going on. And you can just know this is spiritual attack going on here. This is spiritual stuff happening right now. The closer you are to God, the wiser you will be in life. And the more you set yourself up for practical success. Getting close to God is the key. Number one. And notice it says to fear the Lord. And that does not mean to be scared to death of God. It does not mean that you should be so scared of God that you avoid God. But to fear him means to have a reverential awe. Now, in the biblical world, in the ancient world, even up to the medieval world, it was customary when you approached a king that you would bow to the king, kneel to the king and bow to him. In many cases, you were expected to approach him prostrate, to be lying on the ground, and you weren't even supposed to look at the king. And in fact, many cultures and stuff, you couldn't look at the emperor or look at the king because he was like a god. And the idea was that you were to have that kind of fear, that reverential respect. Well, we should understand that we should respect those in authority, but we should not worship those in authority. The only one we're really supposed to have a reverential worship and awe of is God himself. And we should have that respect of God. When we go into prayer, we're praying to the God of this universe. We think we're all hot stuff when we figure out something and build a great business or build something cool or accomplish something, write a great book, whatever. But God built the entire universe. We can't compete with that. And so we should be humbled before God and recognize that and approach him in reverence and awe and complete and total humility. And that's step one in knowing how to deal with change and knowing whether God is the one changing or not, and how to follow him is approach him in awe and reverence and worship. Step two is found in the following steps are found in this great passage, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, which is a great passage to memorize. Trust in the Lord with some of your heart. Well, that's not what it says. It's trust in the Lord with all your heart. I bring back a question I asked before. What is it, and I'm serious with you this morning, what is it that you're looking to for happiness and security in your life? And if the answer is anything but God, then you're literally putting your trust in something that will go away, in something that will let you down. No human being in your life, for example, can meet all of your needs. Your spouse can meet a lot of your needs, humanly speaking, but your spouse cannot meet all of your needs. Your children can meet some of your needs, but your children cannot meet all of your needs. And by the way, one of the most dangerous things a parent can do to ruin, and I mean that, ruin their child's life, is to lean on their children to meet their emotional needs. It is not the responsibility of your child, parent, to meet your emotional needs. And if you're looking and counting on your child to meet your emotional needs, and you put all that pressure on your child, which is something that child can't sustain, you can destroy that child. But people have unmet needs, and so they turn to anything and everything they can. They will turn to addictions. They'll turn to alcohol, drugs, sex, pornography. They'll turn to all kinds of stuff to get their needs met. And none of that will meet your needs in the long run. It may give you a temporary shot, that kind of gives you a little bit of pleasure. But in the long run, it will not meet your needs. It will not sustain you. The only one equipped to meet your needs is the one who created you and the one who knows you better than you know yourself. God is equipped to meet your needs, and it is to him that we must turn to meet our needs. That means we trust in him with our whole heart. We trust completely in him, and we lean not on our own understanding. Now, I often wonder what that meant. That really confused me, because I like to plan. I like to make plans. And you know the old saying, the best way to make God laugh is make a plan, right? You've heard that. And so I'd read a verse like this, and I'd be like, well, that means I shouldn't plan, right? I shouldn't even think things through. I can't trust my mind, so I guess I better not even use my mind. And Jane would say, sometimes I don't. But anyway, so I guess I shouldn't. That confused me for a while. But there's a difference. The Solomon here does not say, don't engage in understanding. Solomon does not say, don't think. Solomon says, lean not on your own understanding. In other words, don't count on, lean on, completely trust in yourself. Instead, trust in God. And as you're thinking, and as you're planning, and as you have understanding, that's good because God gave you a brain, and he expects you to use your brain. But as you're using your brain, trust in God with all your heart. That is what this passage is saying. And it says, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. I'm going to come down from the stage here for a second. Here's where people get in trouble when it comes to a change in plans. They'll, maybe if they're somewhat conscious in their faith, they'll consult with God, they'll pray to God and say, Lord, what do you want me to do? They feel like they get an answer, then they proceed off in that direction. They start going in that direction, and then all of a sudden, they're like, maybe I should consult with God again. Lord, and the Lord says, you're on the wrong path. Now, if God wants you over here now, it's a lot more difficult if you're several steps in the wrong direction, and then you've got to change and get back on the path that God wanted you on in the first place. You've just lost a lot of time. Now it's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of inconvenience. It's going to be difficult to get back on the right track. This is why you can't turn a battleship on a dime. And this is why the whole thing about sowing and reaping is big, because if you spend years sowing bad seed, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to start sowing good seed, a lot of people think that, okay, I'm going to sow good seed now, therefore all my life's problems should be fixed. Well, no, you still got all this bad seed that you sowed. See, so the best thing is, in all your ways, as you're going through life, all your ways, that's just not a few, that's everything. Think about that. Everything. In all your ways, in everything you do, acknowledge God, and he will direct your steps. So everything you're doing, you should be constantly in prayer before God, constantly praying to him, Lord, is this what you want me to do? Lord, is this what you want me to do? Is this what you want me to do? Am I on the right track? How do I handle this, God? Constant communication with God. Constant and continual trust with God. Then he promises to direct your steps. Life is kind of like a minefield. You know what I'm saying? Things blow up. Have things ever blown up in your life? Things blow up, right? Okay, I'm not the only one, right? Things blow up sometimes. Relationships blow up, circumstances blow up, jobs blow up, things blow up in life. And if I'm in the middle of a minefield, the best person I can talk to is the person that has a map of that minefield. God has the map of the minefield. God can direct you through the minefield of life. That's what this verse is promising, this wonderful passage. Let me give you a quick example from Scripture as we close. Mary and Joseph, we're just getting ready. We just said goodbye to Christmas. It's hard to believe we're almost at the middle of January now. This year is flying by already, and it just started. But as we say goodbye to Christmas, Mary and Joseph, let's agree. The morning that Mary got up, later that day, she was going to see an angel. She didn't know that. She got up, and Mary had plans. She had plans for her life. She probably had plans for that day. She got up and was going about her chores, going about her duties and everything, and she had been assigned. We don't know how everything worked, but if she followed normal Jewish customs, her family did, then she was probably told she's going to marry Joseph. All right, and she's probably about 15 or 16 years old at this point. We don't know exactly, but she's definitely a teenager. So teenage Mary, getting up, she's making plans. She knows she's going to marry Joseph. She's now making plans to build a life together with him. And she's probably counting on the fact that she's going to grow up and pretty much die in that very community that she's living in. Well, the angel appears to her, and the angel says, okay, Mary, you're going to be pregnant. And guess what? You're not just going to bear any baby. You're going to bring the Messiah into the world. That's right, Mary. You are going to give birth to God in the flesh. And so Mary hears this. This represents, can we all agree, a change in plans, okay? This was not Mary's plan. This was not her plan. This is a change in plans. So she asks the logical question, how can this be since I have not known a man? And so the angel says, the Holy Spirit's going to come on you, and the Holy Spirit will take care of that. It takes tremendous courage and faith on Mary's part to say what she says next. Be it unto me as you say. Tremendous faith and courage. Because I want you to picture the conversation she then has with her parents later. Mom, Dad, I'm pregnant. But guess what? I was not unfaithful. God is the one that's making me pregnant. Imagine the conversation she has with Joseph. Hey, honey, we need to talk. Need to tell you something. I'm pregnant. Imagine what Joseph's thinking. Now, we cheat. We do this all the time. We cheat. We look back in the scriptures. We know everything that happened. And we look back and we think, well, of course Joseph should have believed her. How could Joseph, oh, ye of little faith? If it had been me, I would have believed. Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Your fiance comes to you and says, I'm pregnant, but don't worry, I didn't cheat on you. What are you going to think? All right. And so, this is a big deal. So Joseph now, his plans have changed. He's thinking he's going to get this. He's got a carpentry business going. He's building that up, and he's going to make his life here in his hometown. And Mary's going to be at his side, and they're going to have kids. And that's his plans. God had different plans. And now he's got to change this. And so Joseph is anxious and worried, but Joseph is an honorable man. He decides he's not going to subject Mary to unnecessary humiliation. He's not going to have her stoned, which he could have done under Jewish law. Honorable man. He decides he's just going to divorce her privately. He's going to make it quiet and just divorce her. Still emotionally gut-wrenching for him, and no doubt for Mary too. So then Joseph has a dream, and the angel appears to him in a dream and says, believe your wife. She's telling you the truth. They were legally married, but they hadn't consummated the marriage yet. So it's kind of an interesting Jewish laws. They're kind of almost married, but not quite. And so the angel says, believe Mary. She's telling you the truth. So Joseph, okay. So imagine the conversation Joseph now has with his parents. No doubt he's going to, Mom, Dad, you can relax. It's okay. I had a dream. Okay, just imagine that. Imagine, parents, if your kids came to you and said, it's going to be all right, I had a dream, and an angel came to me in the dream. I'm fine, we're fine. This is tremendous faith and flexibility that these young people are showing right now. So then, the story, what happens, Joseph's got to go pay taxes, and so they go to Bethlehem. And there's a reason why they are in Bethlehem for up to 2 years, why they didn't go back to their hometown. And I think you can read between the lines. One of the reasons is the public shame that they no doubt would have encountered amongst their neighbors and family. So they felt it's best for them to be on their own, separation time, And so they're in Bethlehem on their own for a while. And then Joseph has another dream. Get your family out. Go to Egypt. Herod is on the lookout, is going to come kill your baby. So now Joseph's got other plans. He's already adjusted his plans once. He's already changed direction once. I mean, we're talking a major change of direction. And now he's got to change direction again. Lord, I just built up my business, and I had my business going well in my home community, and now I got to build business up in Bethlehem, and now you're making me move again? And this is not an easy thing. Get your family and move to Egypt may be easy for us today, because we can just go on Travelocity.com or whatever, pull up whatever travel app there is. I don't even keep track of all the apps anymore. And just, punch it in. Okay, Mary got us on the 840 to Egypt, to Cairo. We'll be fine. The baby gets to fly free. We don't have any of that back in the ancient world. Instead, Joseph's got to make the arrangements himself to move his family, to transport them into a different country on the run, without any, doesn't know the future and what's going to happen other than what the angel told him in the dream. He's got to reestablish his family and make a new life there. That takes great courage. And yet Joseph did it. Now imagine hypothetically if Joseph would have leaned on his own understanding. If Joseph would have said, okay, I know the angel came, but I got time. I'm sure I got time. So I'm just going to take my time and wrap up my business affairs. It may take a few months, but God wouldn't want me to be irresponsible, so I'm just gonna do my own thing and wrap everything up, and in time we'll move ourselves conveniently to Egypt. And if he would have leaned on his own understanding, the Christmas story would have been very different. Now, God knew what he was doing, and God knew the people he was calling, and God knew that Joseph and Mary were going to obey him. So God in his sovereignty and in his providence knew exactly what was going to happen, and he knew how things were going to turn out. But, a lot of times we do not trust God with our whole heart. We only trust him with some of it. And we don't lean. We lean too much on our own understanding. And so I want to ask you again, what is it in your life that you are trusting in that you're not giving up to God? It's going to be hard for you to accept change and deal with change in your life if you're trusting in anything other than God. But if you are trusting in God, if you are depending on him, then like Jude, you will be able to have the flexibility where even though Jude was eager to do what, by the way, is a good thing, And yet he was able to be flexible and change and go in a new direction. Flexible because he was trusting in the Lord with his whole heart. Incidentally, this is actually a good thing. Jude wanted to do a good thing. It's easy when we make a choice between sin and obeying God. You know, not easy, but it's simple. You know, it's like if, let's say you're short on money and there's an opportunity for you to steal. And so you pray and you know God doesn't want you to steal. Well, that's kind of a simple choice. It's okay, I know I shouldn't steal. I know I should obey God. This is a little more subtle. What Jude wants to do is he wants to write a letter to encourage his fellow believers about their common salvation. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. No one here could possibly say that this is a bad thing. Jude wanted to do a good thing and was very eager to do it, but God had other plans. Sometimes the good thing isn't the right thing. I had someone come to church one time visiting here, and he had some ideas on what we should do as a church. And I get this a lot from a lot of people, and this person said he believed our church should become a homeless shelter and should be a homeless shelter. And I patiently explained to him some of the logistics and challenges that would be involved in doing that. And he said, no, nothing that you do right now is as important as the church becoming a homeless shelter. That is what you need to do. And I said, well, that's not what God has told me. Now, I agree that I think homeless shelters are great. And I believe that we should do. I believe we should support homeless shelters in our community. That's great. It's a great thing. Wonderful. But not only are there logistical challenges, we'd have to reconfigure our whole building to be up to code for Montgomery County to be approved to be a homeless shelter, and you have to go through the zoning and all that. We'd have to have staff on here 24/7. You know, all kinds of logistical challenges with this. But if that's what God wants us to do, that's what we'll do. But that's not then and not now what I feel God calling us to do as Olney Baptist Church. And he couldn't understand this because he had a good idea. And one of the hardest things about being a pastor is saying no to good ideas. Because sometimes ideas are good, but it's not the right time for them, or it's not the right direction for us. You know, if you could make yourself so busy doing a lot of good stuff, but we need to be concerned with what's the right stuff that we should do. What's right? What does God want you to do specifically? Jude wanted to do a good thing, but this was not what God wanted him to do. God wanted him to write this other letter, and that's what Jude did. So you will be happiest in life if you let God lead you and you follow him and trust in him. Trust in him with your needs. Trust in him when it comes to the uncertainty. Trust in him when he inconveniences you. Trust him, follow him, and obey him. I close with this illustration. This guy had just gotten a pilot's license. He was a brand new pilot, and he was now flying in cloudy weather, and it was near zero visibility. And he was now going to have to land based on instruments alone, and he had never done that before. And so he radios the tower, the control tower, and he's pretty scared. He's saying, you know, I've never landed a plane just based on the instruments and input from the tower. I've always been able to see. And he was panicked. He was afraid. And the air traffic control person said, just do what I say, and I'll take care of the rest. There's going to be a lot of times where you're going to have like near zero visibility in your life. But if you just follow God and trust in him and do what he says, he'll take care of the rest, and he'll bring you safely home. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for how wonderful and awesome you are. I thank you for the fact that we can trust in you, that we don't trust in a man-made idol. We trust in the all-powerful God of this universe. So, Father, I pray that you will help us to depend on you. If anyone here today, whether they stay in where they are and just pray quietly to you, or whether they come forward, if anyone here today needs to take a burden and a worry in their life and lay it at your feet, I pray you'll give them the courage to do so today and the faith to do so today. If anyone here today needs to let go of certain aspects of their life and be willing to accept the changes that you bring to our lives, Lord, this invitation's for them. I pray that you will help us trust in you. I pray, Father, that we can know that even when things get dark, and even when things get uncertain, and even when things happen in this life that we don't like, you are the one constant of our life, and we can always count on you and trust in you. So, Father, this invitation be committed to your honor and glory alone. If anyone needs to make a decision for church membership or baptism, or salvation, or this invitation is certainly open for them as well. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you'll please stand.